Hi, I'm Michael Lee, and I write for the Nerds of Color. How are you, Rona?
Yay! Hi, Michael. Nice to meet you.
Nice to
You got
meet
the bow
you.
shirt.
I do got the flower shirt, and I've got also this. And then one more thing. I've also got the film from the D23. So I'm like a
Oh,
bow fan,
I
but
have this. Ning.
you have that. So, but this is not about bow, but there are some small connections to it in terms of the cultural specificities. And what I wanted to know was, because it's so significant, because it comes to us from a Chinese Canadian teenage girl's perspective, but it's also very honest and humorous about puberty and coming of age. So I was wondering, where did you find that balance with telling the red panda transformations as a metaphor with the mother-daughter experience of growing up and that relationship?
Yeah, it really, this story is really personal to Domi, and like so much of it, you can just trace it back to exactly like her relationship with her mom and her growing up. And I feel like probably for everybody, because everybody has gone through that teenage awkward tween years, and for me especially, like that's also my story. Um like being my mom's mini me, saying that my mom and I are best friends and doing everything together, having the same thought, regurgitating the same words, and all of a sudden it's like I have pimples all over my face. My hair texture suddenly started to change, and now I suddenly don't want to be seen with my mom, and my mom being completely confused, and me struggling with why do I feel this way, and why like do I do things that make my mom angry at me? These are all feelings that I feel like is so true to us. So the balance that you're talking about, I feel like came so naturally for Domi and our writer Julia Cho, where it's just kind of this story that we all went through, and it was who we were at that age, and yeah, we just wanted to tell an authentic story.
So what sort of experiences did you draw upon other than your own? Was it just really specific to Domi's, or was it like a collective effort, I guess, so to speak?
I would, if I have to give like a percentage, I would say it's definitely like 80% Domi. Like this is her story, and all of us were. What we were doing is finding places where we connect, and where we connect, we bring our own authentic experiences. So, like you know, for everybody, like even one of our art directors, she has she has a daughter and a son, and her daughter, she wasn't 13 at 2002, but her daughter was. And so for her, she was like, hey, let me go find my daughter's videotape of her doing a Backstreet Boy dance, and let me find her and like her handwriting, so I know how to design the handwriting that May and Miriam would have when they're passing around notes. And so for all of us, it's like, because this film is so relatable and the story that Domi's trying to tell is so relatable, it's easy for us to find some parts of our lives that we can like open up and look at and then put it into the film.
That's great. What's also interesting is your job, because you are kind of a parent yourself in overseeing everything that's going on. So can you talk about some of those challenges of making sure everything's in sync, and that Domi's vision is carried out, especially during a time where it's hard to, I guess, work in the same office at once?
Yeah, I would say it all started kind of on Bao. Like my relationship with Domi, I feel like Bao was this like really amazing. I'm so grateful for that opportunity, because we really solidified our shared artistic language, our like way of communicating with each other, our trust, our respect for one another. That on Red, I just find ourselves like always finishing each other's sentences, and even in reviews, if she has a moment where she's like, and she just pauses, suddenly I know, I'm like, you don't like that color. Should we go with a green? And she's like, yes, that's exactly what I was thinking about. So like those are things that, we came onto the show with. In terms of the pandemic, I feel like because when top leadership have like a unique and special relationship like I do with Domi, and I have that too with Lindsay and Danielle, when the team sees that, they really feel that collaborative spirit. And I feel like my relationship with the rest of the team has always been very trusting and collaborative as well, because they know that Domi trusts me, I trust Domi. And so in turn, they feel that relationship with me and Domi as well. And they always feel very free to go directly to Domi. They feel free to pitch ideas. They feel really free to open up their own experiences to Domi and say, can I put that into the film? That was one major part of it. You touched upon the pandemic, and it was really, really hard for all of us. And one way that, Danielle thought it was a great idea to boost morale and foster an environment of collaboration was she created this thing called the Power Panda Poof weekly nominations, where, people can send in weekly just singing praises for people over email to her. And you can say somebody went above and beyond or did me a favor when they really didn't have to. And then Monday during a crew tea time, Domi and her would read these emails out loud and just really like uplift people, because when we don't see each other face to face, it's so easy for people to feel unseen and lost in the shuffle, and just isolated. And I feel like these small things that we did was a way to bring the crew together.
So I can't, I need to talk about the food, because the food scene is so amazing. And it's a lot of, it's also very different because not only you're using different ingredients, but it seems to be different styles and techniques, camera usage. I was wondering, what can you tell us about your approach to that scene that you wanted to do in this film, but you couldn't do in Bao?
Yeah. I feel like this film has way more dishes than we did on Bao. And, we were, so much of the food kind of came from our personal lives too. I remember when Domi was like, we have like a few food scenes coming up, and it's like, oh my gosh, Domi, my mom used to cook me these like green onion pancakes. And she was like, oh my God, my mom did too. And so it's these things where we just like incorporated things that, we knew into the film. For a lot of the food scenes, we're working with a greater budget. And so we can have more ingredients, we can have more dishes on the table. What you didn't ask about this, but one of the things that I feel like, because we tackled this on Bao, that really benefited us on this show was we knew that on Bao, food needs to be oily, look oily and glossy in order for it to feel delicious. So on this film, immediately, it's almost like we learned from on Bao, from the trial and errors. And this one, we hit the ground running in terms of food, where it's just like, color has to be saturated, it has to be vibrant, and it has to feel really oily for it to be delicious. So we did all of that. Yeah, did that answer all of your questions regarding food?
Okay. And for one, I guess it's in closing, what is like the one, I guess, recommended dish you would have from this film that you would like suggest everyone to at least try, or that you love so much?
Oh my gosh, I would say like the Chinese porridge is always like such a comfort food, like especially the congee, like especially when like your mom makes it, and even if your mom doesn't make it, it's like go to the local dim sum restaurant. It's like, it's just so soothing and it's so flavorful. It's like packed with like seasoning, and but people just think, oh, it's like boiled rice, but it's so like satisfying, right? Yeah,
it's so comforting, like you said. Well, that's it. I thank you so much for taking your time out of your day to interview me and the Nerds of Color. I hope you have a great day, and this film's amazing. So I'm going to suggest everyone to see it. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you so much, Michael. Thank you for talking.
Bye.
Bye.
I'm Michael Lee, and I write for the Nerds of Color. How
Hello.
are you, Patty?
Good. How are you? Nice to
I'm
meet you.
doing very well. Thank you. Nice to meet you. So I'm here. I'm very excited. Yes.
I like your shirt. That's
Thank you.
awesome.
I needed to adjust that, but yes, thank you.
Um,
I'm just going to quickly show some of the stuff that I got of
oh
about.
my God. I love that. I have not seen that. That's amazing.
And then yeah, and then this one last thing. This little swimsuit.
Oh, cute. Have you shown Domi these things?
Yes, I have, and she's was very happy that they have these. But now I'm very excited to see this film because you are making quite a leap in terms of animation from going animating a porcelain doll in Bo from Toy Story 4 to a fuzzy panda, a fuzzy red panda. So, what were some of the challenges in terms of like rigging and movement? And did you get to actually spend some time with Red Panda to see to influence your style or how it would be presented in the film?
Yeah. So we did go, I'll answer the second question first, but we did go on a research trip to the San Francisco Zoo. We were fortunate enough, they opened up the zoo to a small team before the zoo opened. So the red pandas are usually pretty lazy. So it was feeding time. So they actually got up and we got to see them move. And some of the sketch artists came and like just drew their anatomy and tried to figure out some, like, what do they look like when they're sleeping or when they're, climbing a ladder. And they're such cute animals. And I feel very fortunate to have seen them live, like moving. But yeah, I think the red panda was really challenging. It was to build in the computer. She was always this really chubby, short-legged creature when she was drawn and when Rona designed her. And anything with a lot of fur in the computer is really hard to build and to make it look just right. So, and adding to that, she's this 8-foot tall chubby panda with a giant fuzzy tail and like rolls and rolls of fat. And as an animator, we can pose the body and move the limbs around, but you also have to then construct all the rolls of fat. And so it was just very time consuming, not only to animate, but to build. She took about a year to build in the computer and to get her up and running. But once we did, I mean, it was like she had everything worked out. Every control was like driving a Ferrari, like a really souped up car, because we had to build her. We had to make it very robust so that we could get her into all these crazy poses.
So I heard you mentioned it a little bit too. The term "chunky cute" being used in the presentation a lot. I was because of the anime influences. I was just wondering what some of those challenges were in terms of transferring or getting those 2D styles into a 3D space.
Yeah. So in the computer. One of the strengths of the computer is that it produces a really highly detailed image, which generally lends itself to more subtle acting. For instance, you can see a character eye dark, and that's a really tiny movement that doesn't necessarily work in 2D. Now, on this project, we were trying to figure out a way to get the essence of 2D in a 3D world. So to be honest, I wasn't sure if it was going to work at first. We spent a lot of time in pre-production doing a lot of animation tests and trying to figure out what was the right balance. How much can we move these characters? How little can we move them without them what we call dying on screen. So if in the computer, since it's highly detailed, if they stop moving, they look like they die. So we had to find that balance of like, can we just move it a tiny bit? Can we keep the body stiff and use this idea of isolated motion and just have a hand raise on screen, or just have the head turn and not turn the entire body? So moving away from the hyper realism and physics that we usually put in our animation at Pixar, and figuring out a new way to cartoonify those moves.
So now you're cartoonifying moves with real life, like real world stuff. So what was it like to animate all those cooking scenes? Because that seems to play a central role in introducing the dad and the relationship, the family dynamics between everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say the nice thing about Turning Red is that it's like having a toolbox, and you have to figure out, when am I going to use the wrench or when am I going to use the screwdriver? And for Turning Red, we didn't throw out everything that we've learned about animation in the past, but we had to figure out when to make things more cartoony and when to make it more realistic. And what we found was that if it was a comedic moment, we tend to lean more in the cartoony side. And if it was a sensitive, heartfelt moment where, someone was crying or, thinking, but there was no dialogue, then you would lean more on the traditional Pixar style of animation, which is more detailed and more realistic. For the cooking moment that you described, we were leaning more towards realism because it was an homage to those beautiful cooking shows. I don't know if you saw Jiro Dreams of Sushi, but it's like these close-up shots of them chopping, and it was like we wanted it to look real, like we wanted it to look more realistic.
So why what was that third rail for you? What was that line you wouldn't cross for making sure that things weren't too cartoony or too realistic? Where did you find that balance basically for the animation?
In the end, I think that we found that whatever the emotion was of the scene would drive all of the decisions. And so, for instance, like May is drawing in her notebook and she lands on her bed and she is totally still when her mom walks in, and just her eyes move down and move back up and to look at her notebook. That is a moment where it was really obvious, like, okay, she's checking. So just her eyes would move. And a lot of the times, there were scenes where, Aaron showed that shot of Panda pushing the girl into the bathroom. And so it was really just, you wanted the audience only to look at the arm and only to look at the girl getting pushed in. So limiting the motion in her body seemed like an obvious choice.
Okay, well, that's all the time I have. I want to thank you for spending your time with me. This is all great. I'm
thank you.
encourage everyone to see this. This is such a great film. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Fanboys, professional artists, and professors. Maybe a nerd who's just like you, talking about the things that you like too. So I invite you to the NOC. In full color, you see me. The hard knock life, comics, movies, and TV. Yeah, pop culture with a different perspective. Watch it on your screen, hit play, so check this.